Good day and welcome to another edition of Inside Pass, News 24's rugby podcast as we reach the final bend of the Rugby Championship, a 2025 Rugby Championship that has had mountain pass bends. If you look at how the Boks started the tournament, losing 38-22 to Australia after leading 22-0 after 19 minutes. Funny enough, now they hold the baton as we reach the what looks like to be quite the grandstand finish, as the Boks, right at the bend of the relay, held the baton, hold the lead. It is a 1 point lead. It is 1 point lead as they head into the round. They've got 15 points. New Zealand, who are playing Australia at the Burswood Stadium, better known as Optus Stadium, they're on 14 and they need a very big bonus point win. And they also need to cut down a very big points difference. The Boks are sitting nicely there on plus 55. That kickoff on Saturday in Perth is what some people will call, what I would call Australia's Bloemfontein. That is at 12 midday. South Africa are in Twickenham, not in Cordoba, not in Salta, not in Mendoza or some of those far-flung places next to the Andes. Where they'll be playing Australia, they'll be playing Argentina, in London, Twickenham, probably under decent weather at Tuesday's press conference. Rassie Erasmus did say that they had some really nice weather leading the world when they arrived. They arrived there on Monday. Didn't train on Monday, trained on Tuesday, named his team. Australia, from a points perspective, they're on 11 points, Argentina on 9. So if Australia win, it pretty much paves the way for the Springboks to win the Rugby Championship. They'll still need to win to make sure that they don't have to deal with Bafana Mats, but that's another story for another day. Argentina on 9 points, but they could also put a proper spanner in the works, considering that it is their home game, and they'll try to make the best of it. Moving to changes. Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus, in a move that shocked my fellow colleague, our senior rugby master here, Mr. Simkabanisa, only making one starting change with Oxenche coming in for Buan Fenter, and then 3 changes on the bench that pretty much show up the team. And then there was last week's 67-30 win over Argentina, where Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu, who's got a lot of people talking, including a colleague of ours who was moving around calling himself Sacha Mngomezulu, trying to imitate the kick, the chase, also the dummy. Look, that's the kind of thing you want to see from a player, and you just get people buzzing on the Monday after a test match. It's a pity that this is the last Boks test match from a South African perspective. They still have 5 matches on the end of year tour, so there's still a lot of Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu that needs to be seen over November, but that's next month's problem. Let's deal with this weekend's problem and how he'll show up this weekend. But Prasim, you are here, you watched. What did you make of SFM 37?
Yeah, look, when you talk about our colleague excitedly sort of reenacting, what Sacha did, the thing about our colleague is, I think he's about late 20s. If Sacha, a 23-year-old, can inspire sort of a 28-year-old man or whatever it is to sort of do that, imagine what it's doing for the kids out there. Kids watching rugby. So it was, the performance itself was it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen on a rugby field.
Yeah. Look,
I think if you're into your rugby and you understand your rugby, in a very strange way, it shouldn't have come as a surprise, because we've all, I think the first time most of us saw Sacha about 3 years ago, whatever it was, you can tell when you see players like that. It's like seeing Max Verstappen for the first time. It's like seeing Carlos Alcaraz for the first time.
Yeah.
Nadal, all these guys that are sort of obviously extravagantly gifted. And, you could see it, you understand it, but it still takes you by surprise, especially when he scores 37 points. I made a joke elsewhere about, the 37 points, and that Sacha, before the Stormers' Glasgow Warriors match, he went to their coaches, to the Stormers coaches, and this is the quarterfinals of the and he went to the coach and said to them, listen, I was having a look at YouTube, and there's the Springbok fly that I'd never heard of before, who kicked 5 drop kicks. I'd like to try and emulate it this weekend.
Yeah.
And instead of saying to him, geez, you don't even know who Yanni de Beer is. That's the first part. And dude, you're not really going to try and kick 5 drop goals. The coach he was talking to says, you know what, Sash, I know that was 15 point, but it sounds 30 sounds even better. And that was what he was going to try and do that weekend. And so the irony of this past weekend was that one of the guys he passed en route to setting the new record for the points scored was Yanni de Beer.
And he wasn't even born at the time of the game.
Yeah, he wasn't even born at that time. So it's one of those weird things. You've got this guy who, some of his rugby history is probably, not even quite up there yet, and rightly so because he wasn't born.
Yeah.
Who is, by the looks of it, is going to rewrite how we look at the game. That for me is insane.
You're speaking of people rewriting how we look at the game. He had a very big part in how Cheslin Kolbe scored a simply superb try. And then there's also Cheslin's brain fart. Just walk us through those two contrasting yet equally memorable moments.
Yeah, I'll start with Cheslin's because it happened before, the kick pass. But the thing with Cheslin is, a lot of people will talk to you about Cheslin's physical qualities.
Yeah,
he's not a particularly big man. I think he's 1.71 meters tall and probably 80 max weight wise. But he's so physically strong, he's so explosive, he's so dominant, he's quick, he's got feet, he's got all the skills in the world. He can catch an up and under despite being that height, above a guy who's even taller than him. But what people don't talk about when it comes to Cheslin is his rugby IQ.
Yeah.
The reason Cheslin Kolbe is such a problem is because he's one of those players where rugby IQ meets outrageous physical and athletic qualities.
It meets bravery.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's literally like a perfect storm if you want to call it anything. So that's so for him to have done something that stupid in inverted commas, it was like it just wasn't believable.
Yeah.
But it also showed that I know everyone now is wise after the fact, but what it actually also showed us is that a lot of us actually didn't know. Didn't know that he couldn't drop it, and didn't know that if Chocobares, maintained the 5 meters, he could actually play the ball. We didn't know any of that stuff, that he had to punt it. And, we only found out afterwards. So I think the real shock about it was just based on how incredibly smart a rugby player Cheslin is. It was kind of like shocking to see him do something not so smart on a rugby field.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to that kick from Sacha, again, for me the important thing to realize is after Cheslin made that mistake, the incredible thing for me was I looked at a lot of the Boks players. Granted, I was looking at TV, so you can't really say, you see, what's in people's eyes. Yeah. There's a lot of doubt there. Guys are like, ooh, what's going on? Could this be another 2015? Could this be? Guys are very nervy, and the Boks just couldn't get going. And then you had a situation where it became crystal clear that Sacha was like, I'm going to be the one that does this. The guy's 23 years old.
Yeah.
He's shown only glimpses of what he can do, but he just decided. And big parts that show that he's made that decision is obviously the first try that he scores, where he basically shoos poor Kanan Moody away, like, no, sorry, this is mine.
Yes.
And he dives over and scores, chasing his own kick. And then the second one was when he reminds the ref, like, listen, the half is not over, because he thought he'd gotten the lead for the Boks, the halftime lead for the Boks. And then suddenly he's sitting there, he's like, oh, crap, actually, we've got this penalty try against us, we're behind again. He wanted that chance to get them ahead again.
Yes.
And he goes and does it. That is insane. And then, just to add the cherry on top, that kick pass, I don't think Manie Libbok sort of has any envy when it comes to what anybody else can do with a kick pass. Because, Manie does it without looking. But I think if ever there would be one kick pass that he might be a little bit jealous of, it would have been the one for Cheslin, simply because the way he kicked it, Cheslin didn't have to break stride. He just went and got it done. And then the second part of that is, the second part of it is, in that arc, he might as well have just handed him the ball. That's the insane part, and he kicked it to him.
Yeah,
so
45 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, and that's the thing. Usually, when a kick pass is being made, you can see the guy in the picture. At first, you don't see Cheslin, and then you see him run into the picture. They've always said netball is actually one of the sports that that rugby players should play before they play serious rugby, because in netball, you pass into space. You don't pass at the person. So it's to teach you to pass into space so that you can draw the person into the ball, which means they're running at pace by the time they do it.
Yes.
I know it wasn't a pass from a hand, but it was a similar sort of theory at work.
It takes a fair bit of ability to kick a ball.
It takes outrageous ability. I mean, I know we talk about Sacha's kicking. He reminds me personally of, who was it? Juan Martin Hernandez.
Yes.
The way he kicks, you can tell he's played football before. He kicks a rugby ball a bit differently to other guys who've learned their kicking off a rugby ball in rugby.
Yeah. That being said, we now bring in Mr. Mostert, all the way down in reasonably warm Cape Town. I hear that the springs come. There's some fires raging there, but Mr. Mostert, good afternoon. I hope it is well your side. You're often very key, especially when you bring up your 5 takeaways on a Monday. You always leave a paragraph for officiating. Just walk us through what you made of Angus Gardner's officiating on Saturday.
Hey, Twaku. Thank you very much. It's good to join you guys. Yes, I think he, overall, it was a decent performance. Sim has just obviously touched on that whole Cheslin incident, where I think a lot of people, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the players on the field also didn't understand what was going on. But if you look at, to the letter of the law, the referee made exactly the right call. Cheslin had dropped it and it went over the try line, and Chocobares, the centre, was well within his rights to score. So I think it was the right call. I think overall, Gardner handled the game, and it was such a high-paced game. It started. I was doing a live update on the game, and it started at quite a slowish type of pace. I thought it was going to be like a bit of a labouring type of a test match, and then all of a sudden it just exploded. It was almost like at that Chocobares incident with the Cheslin drop goal, where the match just exploded, and the pace was just intense. I struggled to keep up typing. Doing a live update on that. So I think Gardner handled the flow of it quite nicely. I do feel that. At the scrums, I think the Boks were, for me, clearly dominant, and I don't think they got as much reward as they probably should have, or probably deserved in that regard. So if there's a little bit of a markdown I would probably give it to him there. But I think overall, I don't think there were pretty much any complaints. I don't think the Argentines could have complained about the referee. It's not the referee that caused them to lose by 37 points. It's just pure brilliance of some of those Springboks, like we've already mentioned. So I think altogether a pretty decent effort from him.
Yeah. And Andre Piardi will be flying halfway across the world from the Eden Park fortress that he helped secure for the All Blacks to officiate in this game. And we have a pretty good recollection of him at Cape Town Stadium, where he reffed the Stormers to pieces in that final that the Stormers, URC final that the Stormers lost to Munster. Yes. What do you make of his appointment? Just looking back on how he officiated the Australia-New Zealand game and what could be expected of him leading into this game on Saturday.
Yeah, look, I think he's a guy that's has been probably a bit up and down. But I think overall he's not a bad referee. He didn't have the best of games at Eden Park last weekend. The Wallabies, he penalised the Wallabies 15 times, and the All Blacks were only punished 10 times. I know that there was some discontent from the Wallabies camp as to the way he officiated the breakdown. A lot of former Aussie players and pundits said that he was way too lenient on the All Blacks there.
Yeah.
If you look at it, the Wallabies were right in that game. They at the end, I think the All Blacks were a bit nervy in that match, and I guess you can argue that maybe the occasion got to him a bit. It's Eden Park, it's the fortress of New Zealand rugby, so maybe a bit of home ground advantage crept in there. So I think, but it's probably maybe a good thing for for the Springboks ahead of this weekend's match at Twickenham, because I think obviously PRD will be well aware of the criticism that has come his way, and I think he would probably want to be making up for that. I think I see a former Wallaby, Morgan Turanui, has come out and said World Rugby needs to take charge and take aim at PRD over his performance. So the pressure will definitely be on him, and I think he would definitely be more alert and probably would want to step up. I think it's supposedly a neutral venue, but I think it's going to be more of a home test for the Springboks with all the South African fans that will be there at Twickenham. So I think that will play in South Africa's advantage, and maybe maybe those 50-50 calls could go the Boks' way. Obviously it's not technically a home ground for them, but there'll definitely be more South African fans than Pumas fans. But I think PRD shouldn't be completely written off. He's made strides in the last few years as a referee. I don't think this one game. It's not like it wasn't a Bryce Lawrence type of performance at Eden Park. So I think give the guy a bit of a rest, I feel.
No, fair enough. And I think, Herman, just talk us through how Sacha Mania has been received in your part of the world. I mean, we were explaining just up here in Joburg how Sacha Mania just caught on the Monday. You probably see more of him than we do based on the coverage that you do at the Stormers. You get to cover the Stormers week in, week out. Just talk us through how Sacha Mania has been received and just your thoughts on the team that's been named for Saturday.
Look, I think, like Sim said, he's a special player. There's something different about him. Sort of like the comparison with Carlos Alcaraz. I think those guys are pretty much the same age. Sometimes, he's a generational talent. These guys don't crop up every odd year. It's like once maybe in a decade you see a player like this come through, and that's definitely the consensus down here in the Cape. He's definitely the future of this franchise, and especially with the project that they're trying to build here at the Stormers. Coach John Dobson has made that pretty clear that they want to revert back to the old traditional way of Western Province rugby, which was more of an attacking type of play. Players with a lot of flair that need to be given the opportunity to express themselves, and there's no player that fits that bill more than Sacha does. So he fits right into the culture of the team and the way they want to play, and obviously he's a fan favorite already, and he's definitely going to be probably for the next decade if he stays injury free. So, and then on your question on the Boks team, I think it's good to see a bit of continuity creep in now. I think we've had a lot of chops and changes, especially earlier in the season when between the Italy and the Georgia tests, there were a lot of changes made from one game to the other, and I think that sort of halted the flow of the team a little bit. I think they basically picked the same starting 15 that they picked the previous week, except Ox is now back. But Ox was, picked to start last week, and then he pulled out. So it's essentially the same starting 15. So you can sense that Rassie wants to build a bit of continuity. And he said yesterday, in his press, he said he wasn't the best team that he picked, but I think it is. I think you can say it probably is the best team to pick this weekend and to win the championship for the Boks. Obviously, just a few changes on the bench. It's good to see Grant Williams come back. I think he struggled obviously in the game at Eden Park, where I think the tactics the All Blacks used quite clever, and I think he was one to make amends for that. And obviously Jesse Kriel coming back in place of Andre Esterhuizen. He's always been a solid campaigner. So I've got no issues with the team. I think it's good to see the continuity there.
I'll throw this question to Sim first, then I'll come to you. So, SA Rugby CEO Riaan Oberholzer will be holding a press conference tomorrow, and that'll probably address the next year's events, probably around the Nations Championship and the All Black Tour. Now, that leads to the question of where the Rugby Championship fits in here. And you've, Brasim, have been someone who's enjoyed this particular URC, with the Rugby Championship, what lies in the future for this tournament?
Well, I guess that's the big question for me. The reason I've obviously loved this year's competition is the fact that for once, it's always been billed since 2012 when it started. It's always been billed as, the best of the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
But it was always dominated. I think New Zealand in 12 attempts have won it 9 times.
Yeah.
We've won it twice, and Australia have won it once. And in those 3 times that South Africa and Australia have won it, 2 of those were in a World Cup year, which basically means there wasn't enough time for the All Blacks to make up whatever difference, they or head start they'd given away.
Yeah.
So the reason I liked it was like at long last it was reflecting what it's always said, because you've got, up until obviously this past weekend, you had teams that won this week, lost next week, won this week, lost next week, and that was, the general pattern. But now that we have it, what bugs me is now that we have it, we kind of like going to take the air out of those balloons and just be like, oh, well, we're going to take a break, go, get the greatest rivalry tour going and all these things that, kind of like take away from the competition. I'm not sure if a competition that's worked so hard to get to the status can survive sort of like a year or 2 break, because that's the other thing, if you have a break
and
next
it walks
year,
into a World Cup here,
exactly.
which will still be truncated.
Yeah, which then means it's going to be a short there's going to be a short Rugby Championship.
Yeah.
And then, the level of uncertainty is insane, and it's not what we should be, it's not what this competition deserves. But obviously, those decisions were probably made a little bit before this year's competition kind of like turned out to be the best ever.
Yeah. And I think just on your side, Herman, as a final one, just your thoughts on the Rugby Championship and the fact that there's now a move to the tours next year, and that the Rugby Championship is just going to be a fleeting glimpse of Southern Hemisphere rugby unity.
Yes, I think I've got doubts over the future of this event. I think the tours concept is way more appealing. I think New Zealand coming to South Africa for 3 test matches and then playing a bunch of provincial games as well. I think that's going to be massive. It's going to be one of the biggest things to hit these shores in a very long time. And I think it's going to be tough for the Rugby Championship to compete against something like that. Even if the Boks would go, to Australia, or the Wallabies every odd year would come here for a 3-game tour. I just think that something like that would generate a lot more excitement and a lot more interest than what the Rugby Championship does. It's not like there could still be a 2-test tour to Argentina, like we saw in the past before, before the Argentines joined the Rugby Championship. And then obviously there's this Nations concept tournament that's also going to start, looks like from next year, which is going to put further pressure on the Rugby Championship. And I think we'll probably get to a stage where, like you guys have mentioned now, like, in the World Cup year, it is a shortened one. So then it's maybe not even worth playing it. Maybe they're going to get to a stage where it's only played every other year, every 3 years, or every 4 years. And I think that becomes problematic, because I think other things would like a tour, like an All Black tour, would just generate more, I think, interest all over, from whether it's from sponsors, fans, or whatever. I think. I do have my doubts over the future of the tournament. Obviously, the South African teams aren't in Super Rugby anymore as well. So,
and that obviously affects what a broadcast deal will look like.
Yeah. So, I don't think it'll disappear completely, but I think there's going to be some pressure on it.
Yeah. Well, that being said, we've reached the end of this edition of Inside Pass, as we reach the end of the Rugby Championship in the manner that we see it. We still got URC, the United Rugby Nation, the United Rugby Championship. However, though, this Saturday will probably mark the end of an era. For Boks fans, they'll hope that era will result in a successful title defense, something that never happened. But from our side, on the other end of the N1, it's cheers from us.